Bashar al-Assad's regime has fallen to Syrian rebels after they overtook the capital of Damascus. This is a lightning-fast offensive after the rebels captured Aleppo, then Homs. The removal of Assad bring an end to more than 50 years of his family's autocratic rule of the nation of about 23 million, which has suffered a more than a decades-long civil war. Meanwhile, the Syrian prime minister said that the government is ready to cooperate with any leadership the people choose. My guest today is Hazem Alghabra. He's a former senior advisor to the U.S. State Department. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, Hazem.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. A regime that terrified not only its own people, but the whole region for decades falls in a week. What history in the making here. Obviously, this regime was completely propped by Russia and Iran. Russia was occupied in Ukraine the past couple of years. And Iran is defeated in the region. Its main proxy, Hezbollah, that was supporting the Syrian regime, is completely defeated and was unable to help Assad in any way, shape, or form. The Assad regime stood alone with a fatigued army or a non-existing army. Remember, this is an army that has not modernized in over 30 years. And actually 40, if you think about it, it's from the mid-80s, the last time the Syrian army modernized. The regime collapsed in the matter of hours. As soon as the rebels got close to Damascus, you saw the regime forces withdraw, surrender, troops were dismissed. It's so iconic. There was a tank left in the middle of Umayyad Square, the main square in Damascus, that very quickly became a photo booth of Syrian citizens celebrating and taking photos next to that abandoned tank. I think the abandoned tank is the symbol of the Assad regime. This is the memory that people will have of the Assad regime for a long time, an abandoned tank.
We're hearing reports that Assad has fled, reportedly taking off on a plane. It's unclear, though, if he's left Syria. Hazem, what can you tell us about that at this point?
It's very unclear right now. I mean, there were rumors of a downed jet over the city of Homs. There were rumors that a private jet that took him out of Syria into Abu Dhabi at some point earlier today. But it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. He's gone. He's absolutely gone. There is no return for Assad or his people and his allies, actually, to Syria. However, this ushers a new era, an era of challenges and opportunities for everybody involved in the region.
Including the Israelis.
Especially the Israelis, and especially when it comes to opportunity. Let there be no mistake. Israel played a pivotal role in the collapse of the Syrian regime. By taking out Hezbollah and the Iranian proxies, the regime was left without an actual fighting force on the ground. So, its causation or causality also doesn't matter. There is a role for Israel here, and that yields an opportunity for Israel as well. The Syrian people are looking for change. That change does not have to be limited to their own government and their own system. It can be also a change for the way the Syria as a nation deals with its neighborhood. It deals with actually potentially the best trade partner it can ever have in Israel. So there are a lot of opportunities here, and I really, really wish that Tel Aviv is not only looking at the challenges, especially security challenges, which are real, but the potential opportunities when it comes to change in Syria.
A year ago, Hamas launched the October 7th attack and massacre on southern Israel. Hezbollah joined forces the very next day, launching a continuous rocket attack, rocket and missile attack against northern Israel. The Houthis joined in. Essentially, every single Iranian militia declared a seven-front war against Israel. A year later, Hamas has been dismantled. Hezbollah's capabilities in southern Lebanon have been significantly decreased. Now the situation in Syria means that Iran's entrenchment in the country has been almost squashed, essentially. Assad has been overthrown. His whereabouts are unknown. How much did the past year lead to this very moment in your eyes?
I believe it fully led to it. This would not have happened if not only the regime was physically weakened after losing the Iranian support and the Iranian militia support, but even in the eyes of the normal person in Syria, that regime lost all respect. Remember, that regime forced a trade with the Syrian people. Said, well, you give me your freedom, your dignity often, and I trade you, and also your economic opportunities, and I will protect you from this idea of Israel, an idea propagated by the Syrian regime and its allies, that Israel is such an ugly, scary thing. It's coming to take your land, take your stuff. And, it was so interesting. It's a theory created by the regime, and it's a protection against a non-existing threat propagated by the regime. Then the regime fails to play his own theater and fails to protect the people from Israel. Israel is emerging as a superpower in the region. There's no mistaking that. The whole region is changing, and there's this moment. If you think about it, the past, almost 80 years of Israel are kind of built or happened to reach this very moment we're in right now. And I think, and this is what I tried to tell you about earlier, the opportunity here is fantastic. Obviously, as we mentioned, the challenges are there. There's a lot that can go wrong, but, peace with the UAE was fantastic. Bahrain also, great. Potential peace with Saudi Arabia, also very good. But peace with Syria is an end game. Nothing will be the same if that can be accomplished. The whole region will change overnight, and you have this compatibility right now, this very unique moment, even economic compatibility between, let's say, Syria, a country that has, Syria is very good at producing food and food stuff. However, Syria needs energy right now. And even their production capabilities are fully disabled because of need for energy. We look at Israel. Israel needs food stuff. However, plenty of energy. So I'm really hoping that both sides will see this compatibility. Let's not talk about peace. Let's talk about trade right now. Let's start there. Let's start with something clear, achievable. And I really hope this, maybe a small trade mission or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's hard to speculate what that would look like, but to, plant that small seed of trust between the two people after 60 years of the Syrian regime lying to the people and vilifying Israel in every way possible, that will lead to peace. I guarantee you, the Syrian people, and we're talking about the people on the ground, the people at large, do not want any more wars. They've had more than enough wars. I think people are looking for peace.
This the stunning speed of this rebel offensive has caught much of the world off guard. It's brought a stunning reorder of power in the Middle Eastern nation that has long been, as you mentioned, that crossroads of regional power struggle between Russia, Iran, Turkey. But this really marks, as you said yourself, Hazem, the collapse of Iran's artifice. Iran has been entrenched in Syria for decades. You mentioned the opportunities here for Jerusalem, but I want to discuss a little bit about the challenges because, yes, this opens a door, but at the same time, let's talk about those challenges that those Israeli forces, which have now been buffered on the Syrian border with Israel in the Golan Heights, what are some of the potential, challenges the Israelis will be facing when it comes to these rebels who, let's not forget, the leader of this rebel force did have origins in Al-Qaeda.
Absolutely. And not only origins, he was leadership. There are concerns. There are plenty of concerns. Not only, I will get to Jolani, or now he goes by his original name, Ahmad Shara, but also let's talk about the Iranian stragglers that are left behind. There are still Iranian-aligned forces operating in Syria. These did not simply disappear. Actually, interestingly enough, one of the areas that the rebels have not really taken over yet is a Damascus suburb where the Iranian militias reside, called Sit Zainab. So there are existing challenges that are not resolved. But also there are, and by the way, this is a big part of the reason the IDF forces took positions in Golan Heights today, because there was a real concern that a collapse for the regime will yield an opportunity for these Iranian-aligned forces to conduct operations they were technically not allowed to conduct while Assad was in power. But let's talk about the elephant or elephants in the room here. There are multiple factions operating in Syria right now. It's unclear. Obviously, Jolani, or as he goes by now, Ahmad Shara, is the strong man of the group. But it's unclear how the power map will look like by the end of the week. A lot is changing, and things are changing incredibly fast. We see a competition among these different rebel elements. Do we see them working together? And again, very important for our Israeli listeners and viewers, how would any new government body or new group ruling the country look at Israel? There's no denial that Ahmad Shara himself was a detainee in U.S. prisons in Iraq for a while. He started back in 2003. He started fighting against American forces in Iraq, and when he came to Syria, he was sent as an envoy of Baghdadi, the ISIS leader. They broke ties at some point, but that doesn't matter. I was asked about Ahmad Shara specifically earlier today, and I have a little theory or a little of a plan on how to deal with him. He did make a plea for parole, if you may, on CNN a couple of days ago. He said, "I'm a changed person. I should be given an opportunity." Well, maybe he deserves an opportunity, but a very closely watched opportunity. He is a man on parole. He needs to do everything right. Otherwise, we are going to lose trust very quickly. He has a lot of ground to make to gain the trust of the international community. That change from a leader of a terrorist group into a believer in democracy and religious freedom, it's quite a change for anybody. So we're not I'm not advocating that we believe that change. I advocate that we keep a close eye and judge based on actions, not only the immediate actions, but intermediate to long-term actions. Maybe he's reformed. I don't know. Nobody knows right now. Only time will tell. But we have to remember, we did not choose Ahmad Shara. He made his way to power. He is a fact of life right now for Syria. So we need to be smart on how to deal with that newly emerging fact, and how do we protect, our interests, and even potentially the Syrian people from any deviation from this track that this group and this person claim to be following.
Hazem, you mentioned the different factions that are active in Syria. That also includes the US-backed Kurds. How are they viewing the situation that's unfolding? Because we know that these rebels are backed by Turkey, which is viciously anti-Kurdish.
So a group is specifically backed wholly by Turkey, which is the Syrian National Army. Early on in the week, we saw clashes between SDF forces and PYJ forces and the SNA, but those did not last a long time. Obviously, Turkey did have a couple of bombardment missions against SDF forces, but nothing sustained or prolonged as of now. So the focus was always on Damascus and on the regime. Now that the regime has collapsed, I think there will be renewed look by Turkey, by its aligned force, Syrian force, into the whole Kurdish issue. I say often and unabashedly, it's unfortunate how obsessed this Turkish government is with the Kurds. I mean, there are a couple of million Kurds in Syria. It's not such an existential problem for Turkey. However, Turkey always treats the Kurds as the most existential of problems for them. It's a bit confusing, to be honest, but I'm not sure, and don't quote me yet, but I'm not sure how much control Turkey has over these fighting elements at this point. I mean, their main objective, obviously, Turkey was the main supplier of food, of currency. The whole economy of the area where the rebels lived for the past 7 years was supported by Turkey. Now there are other options. Will these groups continue to be aligned fully with Turkey, or the SNA at least? Are they going to look for something different? Are they going to look to actually look inward into establishing a country that is not dependent wholly on the whims of a foreign country? Because it's very dangerous and unfortunate if one of the first actions of a newly built Syria that was built on the idea of rejecting tyranny and oppression, if one of the first actions of this new government is to try to oppress the Kurds, it's not acceptable, to be honest, in any shape, way, or form. And not only the international communities keeping an eye and watching carefully, but also the Syrian people are watching. The Syrian people paid dearly for this victory today. This is not the result of a week-long operation or even a year-long war right now in the region. No, this is the result of sacrifices of millions of people in Syria and outside of Syria. This is sacrifices by American troops, by European troops, by people working in offices, on the ground, by aid workers. We can spend a whole hour talking about everybody who was involved directly or indirectly in making this happen. It's an awful obligation to whomever comes next And I really hope I don't see that obligation and that opportunity get squandered just to appease a foreign power.
Do you think that the past developments provide a window of opportunity here to finally put a nail in the coffin that is the Islamic regime in Tehran, which has cinched its claws in the region so deeply? Do you believe that we could see direct military action against Tehran, which the Israelis and the Americans have been speaking about for a very long time?
You know, what's happening in Syria actually in the past week is creating a new way of thinking, a question really. Do we need to strike Iran? Does that regime need a military intervention or just maybe a few weeks before the Iranian people start asking what happened to the $30 billion of Iranian money investments in Syria? And how does the regime always fail, internally and externally? It's really the same thing that happened in Syria. This forced trade of like, okay, we're going to protect you from the evils of Israel. If you surrender everything dear to you, your freedom, your economic prosperity, your dignity. And again, when that theory fails, the people will rise against the regime. Actually, I'm looking forward to seeing a Syria moment in Tehran, a Damascus moment in Tehran. And I think it's possible. The Iranian people are very smart people, actually. They've been impressed, yes. But so did the Syrians. And look what happened. So, yeah, I know it's not going to be as easy and as simple. But, you know, the Iranian people deserve what the Syrian people are trying to accomplish right now.
Absolutely. And I hope it's the beginning of the unraveling of Iran's occupation of Middle Eastern countries, whether it be in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, and hopefully we see the end of it in Iran.
Well, it's two out of four right now. It's Iraq and Yemen that are left on their board. Iraq seems to be getting uneasy about the Iranian interference. I mean, we've seen Muqtada Sadr, we've seen people who are historically aligned with Iran rejecting Iran right now. And, you know, let's not forget, Sarah, the Iranians built this over years and years, decades. For it to unravel that quickly, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. But, you know, the good always has this way of defeating evil, even when odds look stacked. And this is what we're seeing right now.
Hazem Alghabra, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.